means they'll detonate it or find another way to make it safe. They will give the media 15 minutes heads up when they're about to do that. So we will stay on this location and stay on this shot. In the meantime, joining us by phone, former Attorney General for President George W. Bush, Alberto Gonzales. Sir, thank you for joining us.
It's good to be with you.
Your thoughts on all of this? It's an amazing situation. It was compounded. The names involved: former President Barack Obama, President Clinton, his wife Hillary Clinton, George Soros, one of the richest men in the world. What do you make of it all?
Well, it certainly seems to be targeted at people that are the Democrats or opponents of the Trump agenda, the Trump presidency. It's a very dangerous situation. Obviously, there is still a lot of information law enforcement does not have. The first thing, of course, that needs to happen is to make sure that we render the packages safe, and then we begin the examination of exactly who may have been responsible, and that's going to involve, working with joint terrorism task forces in the major cities such as New York, D.C., and Chicago, examining the packaging and see what's similar, what's not similar. Look at the actual devices themselves. They're often signature measures or markings that helps identify whether or not who was responsible for making the bomb. Looking at where the packages were mailed from. Go on the internet. Oftentimes, people responsible for this kind of activity will post something, bragging about something. Look out, something's coming, and so there's going to be a lot of that going on right now. So the FBI, ATF, DHS, working with the Joint Terrorism Task Forces, are doing all of these things, have begun that process, will continue that process until they find out who was responsible for sending these bombs.
Sir, we just got the word in from Debbie Wasserman Schultz's office where she says, quote, she will not be intimidated by this attempted act of violence, adding the appalling attack on our democracy must be vigorously prosecuted. Also going on to say that she is deeply disturbed by the way, quote, my name was used in the attack, but she will continue her work in Congress. This was a deliberate attempt at a form of terrorism, intimidation, perhaps. We don't know who did it, but we do know the backdrop to all of this, the increasing incivility. I call it an incivility crisis that's gripping this nation and seems to get worse by the day. What do we do to turn this around?
Well, I really think it begins with the leadership in our country. I thought President Trump's statements were strong. I'm a little disappointed in some of the reaction to his statement. I thought it took him a little while, I think, to say what needed to be said from the highest official in our country. But uniformly, I think we're hearing some good, strong statements about what the administration is going to do, what they're committed to do, condemning these actions, and they absolutely should be condemned. But I think, as your previous guest pointed out, I mean, we're in a very divisive time right now. There's a lot at stake with respect to these midterm elections, and when there's so much at stake, people are going to sometimes do things that they normally would not do. Right. And I think it's very, very important for the leadership in our country to condemn what's happened here and to discourage this kind of behavior going forward. We've
got less than a minute, but I do want to ask, because the worldwide president of CNN, Jeff Zucker, also weighed in and really saying he attacked President Trump and White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, saying that words matter, and they have not shown a comprehension of that fact. Does leaping on the president and Sarah Sanders at this point help or hurt the situation?
What we've seen in the past, normally when the nation confronts a threat like this, we all come together. We saw it after 9/11. We saw it at Pearl Harbor. And so to so quickly be critical of the president, to me, is somewhat surprising and somewhat disappointing. Yeah. I think we're all better off working together, understanding this is a difficult situation, and we may make mistakes in statements, but we need to move forward together.
Thank you very, very much. And we're going to have more on this fallout tomorrow on FBN on Making Money. My show's at 2 p.m. The 5, though, starts right now.
Well, I'm Jesse Waters, along with Emily Campagna, Juan Williams, Dana Perino, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The 5. The This is a Fox News alert. The hunt is on to find out who is responsible for sending suspicious packages with suspected explosive devices to several prominent Democrats, including former President Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, and also to CNN's New York City offices. We have Team Fox coverage with John Roberts at the White House and Brian Yennis in Chappaqua, New York. First, let's go to Brian near the Clintons' home in Westchester County with brand new information on the FBI's involvement in this investigation. Brian.
Jesse, the FBI says the packages sent to former Attorney General Eric Holder, the Obamas, the Clintons, George Soros, and to CNN were all similar. They were all the same type of packaging. The potential explosive devices were packed into heavy manila envelopes with computer-generated headers. They all had 6 American postage stamps, and all of the packages had a return address of Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz in Florida, and her name was misspelled. Now, on Tuesday night, a package sent to the Clintons was intercepted before it even reached their home here in Chappaqua, New York. A screening technician spotted it at an off-site facility where they check all of the Clinton mail. Now, President Bill Clinton was at home at the time. Former Secretary Hillary Clinton has been campaigning in Florida. Meantime, this morning, this explosive device was mailed to CNN's headquarters in New York. It was addressed to former CIA Director John Brennan, who is a contributor at CNN. It contained wires and a black pipe. There was also an envelope filled with white powder. Now, the Time Warner Center was evacuated. The bomb was moved by a concrete truck, brought to a bomb squad facility to be examined, and then safely detonated. Now, here in Chappaqua, we are just 15 minutes away from the home of George Soros, the billionaire philanthropist and mega Democratic donor. And you'll remember that on Monday, a package was delivered to his mailbox. Now, investigators are now looking at surveillance tape to determine whether or not that package, which had an explosive device, was hand-delivered, put into the mailbox, and not brought there via the mailing system. Jesse.
All right, Brian, thanks very much. Let's now bring in John Roberts with the latest reaction from the White House. John.
And the president saying earlier today in an Eastern event that he is angry, upset, and not satisfied at all with what has been going on here. The president also promising to bring the full weight of the federal government onto the investigation to get to the bottom of it and try to quickly find out who was responsible. When you tick off the list of names of people who got these devices, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John Brennan, Eric Holder, Maxine Waters, George Soros, they count among the president's fiercest either political rivals or critics. So this afternoon, when the president was talking about this, he was very careful to stay away from politics. Listen here.
In these times, we have to unify. We have to come together and send one very clear, strong, unmistakable message that acts or threats of political violence of any kind have no place in the United States of America.
The president made those remarks at an event in the East Room this afternoon to talk about progress being made in the war against opioid addiction. That is a particularly favorite issue of Melania Trump, the First Lady. It's part of her Be Best campaign. And to the surprise of a lot of people, she was introducing her husband this afternoon, and she weighed in on these mailings. Listen here.
We cannot tolerate those cowardly attacks, and I strongly condemn all who choose violence.
The president will be leaving the White House very shortly, headed for a campaign rally in Mosinee, Wisconsin. It's just south of Wausau. The president urging unity against political violence in that same East Room event earlier today. However, when he gets on the campaign trail tonight, he's going to be in a highly competitive state, one where the Republican Governor Scott Walker is in some difficulty. So I think any sense of political comity when it comes to actually defending these races may go out the window. But maybe there's a difference, Jesse, and I don't know, between, the harsh rhetoric that can lead to political violence and the rhetoric to try to win the seat.
Yeah,
just not sure how you draw that line.
Tightrope he's got to walk tonight. John, thank you very much. And we just want to let the viewers know Brennan works for MSNBC, NBC News, not CNN. All right, Dana, really sad day for the country. And saw the president looking very sad and somber at the White House, and now he's got a big rally tonight to turn out the base for the midterms. Just really tough situation for the country and for the president and both political parties.
I don't know if I thought I saw sad. I saw conviction, and one of the things he said is my #1 responsibility and priority is the safety of the American people.
Right.
Whether you're Republican or Democrat, that's his #1 priority. I also think that he was like, well, this is a big deal. And he had just had a briefing from the U.S. Secret Service, Department of Justice, FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security. They are all coordinating with the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and also the NYPD, Washington, D.C. This is something that they train for. They plan for. It is unfortunate. The good news for America is that the U.S. Secret Service, very good investigators. Right? They have great leads. They have an ability to track this stuff down. Plus, thankfully, because none of these devices detonated, they have the evidence to be able to look through, find the fingerprint, cross-check it with possibly any social media posts. I'm not trying to downplay it. It's extremely serious. There could be more out there, but the full weight of the American justice system and our investigative capabilities makes it much more likely that this individual or this group will be caught sooner than later.
Hopefully as soon as possible. Greg, what do you think about the targets here? All high-profile Democrats, former presidents, and very harsh critics of this president. Just a series of mail bombings sent to these individuals. Does this make any sense to you?
You could draw a number of conclusions. You could say, well, this is somebody who doesn't like these people. That would be the obvious thing.
Right.
But I would say that this is not a normal act. So don't act like it's a normal act by a normal person triggered by rhetoric. It's an act of terror by likely a deranged perpetrator or a group. But I'm always, when I look at stuff like that, it looks almost always like it's a single person, but I'm a wait and see guy, so I don't want to make, I think at times like this, you should have less speculation, not more speculation. The problem with cable news is you're required to fill time and speculate, but I realize that when it comes to mass shootings and suspicious packages and certain events, the first conclusion is often, the first conclusion on Twitter is never the right one. The guy that comes out first usually ends up looking like an idiot. So you need, I think, less speculation is better. But I want to say that this illustrates how easy it is to disrupt a free society simply with fear and panic. One person or a handful of people can have an impact of millions with boxes, pipes, and postage. And it's and I think the upside to this is that it is so shocking because it's rare. And we have to remind ourselves it shocks us because it's rare. Because back in the 1970s, this wasn't rare. This was a common problem. There were actual terror groups, domestic terror groups, more than a handful of them who were setting bombs, pipe bombs, trying to kill police officers, actually blowing up themselves. This was a regular thing after, in the early 70s, mid 70s. So this is a rare, disgusting event. It's an act of terror. But to go and try to speculate on anything without first having an arrest or a suspect, I'd stay away from it.
I think recently Trump family members received white powder in the mail, and then some Trump cabinet officials, Juan, received ricin. But this looks like it's taken to a whole nother level when you look at the level of Democratic, office holders, former presidents, former attorney generals, and George Soros, who's, very, very influential person in the Democratic Party in terms of fundraising and things like that. What do you make about today's events?
Well, when I was listening to you guys talk about the rally tonight and how the president would have to walk a tightrope, what strikes me is that his rhetoric is quite incendiary at these events. And I don't think that this is representative of his supporters in any way, but I do think that there are people out there who hear him very clearly when he says, oh, those Democrats lock up Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, he's not really an American, and these people want to do away with ICE. They don't want borders. These are people who want to turn America into Venezuela. I mean, the rhetoric. And then, of course, he's the one who always says, go ahead and punch him. I'll pay your legal bills. The big problem around here is that we don't want to hurt anyone anymore. That kind of rhetoric, I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, really does invite violence. And then you see this today. And, of course, I think for people on the left, the instinct, and I think it's a mistake, would be to jump and say, I know exactly the source of this. The fact
but you just did.
No, I didn't.
You just said it's rhetoric.
No, I said that what you see at those rallies, and I think that you and Dana both spoke to this, at times he uses fear to stir his base.
So you're implying that caused this?
No, I'm implying that is the environment, Greg, that we live in today in the United States. And I think it's the one that paints our political opponents as people who are not Americans, not patriots, not worthy. And I think then it invites the kind of lone actor, someone who may be deranged, to engage in this very destructive behavior.
Well, Emily, do you draw a line between the president's rhetoric and today's events?
I do think, with all due respect, Juan, that it's a bit irresponsible to directly make that assumption, to make that tie that rhetoric caused this. Just recently, we had a former Democratic staffer that was arrested, charged with multiple felonies for doxing 3 GOP senators. Certainly, you can't isolate not only the rhetoric, but also the actual acts. And that brings me to my next point, which is that we shouldn't isolate this, or we should include a larger spectrum of what this act means. And by that, so this was, there was an explosive device. There was also powder, as you pointed out. That's kind of two different things. When I got my death threat as a federal acting director, I was able to call in FPS, Federal Protective Service, OPD. I mean, they were at that guy's doorstep within 30 minutes. And my point is that the resources, there's a whole spectrum of them dedicated to ensuring that nothing does fall within the cracks, and that they treat every threat, you know, the word credible threat, that's a misnomer. Every threat is credible. Nothing is isolated or ignored, because all it takes is one, and that speaks to the integrity of the Secret Service, and as well as the FBI and the other agencies.
Yeah, the Secret Service did an excellent job today and continue to do an excellent job. And we're going to be following the story, more breaking news on the suspicious packages ahead. But first, Democrats doing a major flip-flop on immigration. And we're going to show you the video next on The Five.
So a tree falls in your brand new car and totals it.